Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. People who don't know you probably don't realize you and I are pretty close for lots of reasons.
Lots of reasons.
But what I love is not only obviously I get to have you personally in my life as my best friend, but what brought us together was shared beliefs about the sanctity of life and really being advocates for life. So I'm going to let you choose. I mean, how's this as a friend of you get to choose. Do you want to talk about what has shaped your beliefs about the sanctity of life, or start with what you do? I'm going to let you decide.
I think I'm going to start with what has shaped my view of the sanctity of life. And it starts, I think it was the very beginning. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was able to live very close to my grandparents, and they were very faithful people and were very involved in the pro-life movement. I didn't really know what that meant until I was about 6 or 7. I don't think I even really understood what it meant with the context of abortion until I was much older. When I was, in first grade, between kindergarten and first grade, my parents were expecting another baby. And of course, that's a time of joy and excitement. And especially for my brother and I to be big siblings again, and for my brother to become a big brother, not just the little brother. And I remember very clearly because my parents took us to the dinosaur museum, and they said that God was sending us a special baby. And we didn't know how long our baby was going to live, but we were going to love our baby and take care of our baby. And they thought the baby was going to be a boy. But when my sister Nancy was born, she surprised us all. She was born with a condition called microcephaly and cerebral palsy, which basically meant, in my youthful understanding, was that she really didn't have the ability to have the cognitive thought. She was given her brainstem developed, but up in here where a lot of the thinking and speech occurs, that forward-thinking thought, that part of her brain didn't develop for some reason. And she wasn't supposed to live past her birth, but we were going to love her and take care of her no matter what. And that's what we did. I remember my parents taking home this small, fragile baby, and we oohed and awed over her. And she surprised us all.
Time and time again, she surprised you.
Yeah, she surprised us. But I think the most surprising thing was that what she was able to teach us without ever saying a word. She taught us empathy. She taught us compassion. She showed us what our inner strength was. She showed us how to be humble. She showed us how to be brave. And early on, I saw how people within her community or with similar health conditions were treated, and I thought that was so horrible. Right down to how she was looked at the grocery store. I mean, it's horrible, and I wanted to be a voice for people like her. And maybe that's where I got into advocacy, speaking with a strong voice who maybe weren't able to in that moment, and helping them have their dignity.
And I know you and I have talked about this lots of times, But can you explain to people what you saw or heard, even as a young child, when you say, right, I knew how other people like her were treated or how people looked at her in the grocery store? What was that?
It was like we had an alien baby. Like she was not quite human. She was not of this world. She was not like you and me. I saw people ignore her, talk around us, stare at us like we had something wrong with us when there was nothing wrong with her. She was made perfectly, the way God intended her to be made. And in a way that shaped our lives too. So what was interesting too is that your other part of your question was what people thought we should have done. Yeah, that was a good one too. And I may not have ever told you about that, but that's real bold for people to tell you what your mother should have done with your sister. You should have aborted her. You would have had a better life if your mom had aborted your sister. And that's a horrible thing to tell anyone, let alone presuppose that you had any idea what their life was like or the blessings or the comfort that my mother and our family had knowing that we did right by her, by showing up every day, by giving her the best that we could. And I mean, that's even still today, I don't want to say it's unfathomable, but it shows me that we have a lot of work to do to not just educate in our heads about the sanctity of life, but educate our hearts as well about compassion and empathy and what it truly means to be human. Because I think that she was maybe more human than some of these other people who would say such hurtful things or believe such hurtful things. But yeah, it was pretty awful to be told that your mom should have had your abortion and had an abortion, and you would have had a easier life, and that may be true. I think that it was actually, on the college in college when I was, learning about philosophy and moral ethics and things like that really popped up in a big way, because abortion is often sold to young women who, Melissa, you're going to laugh because I forgot to kennel up your dog's friend.
Oh, that just makes the shot. Only thing that would make it better is if my dog was in it as well.
Right. I guess we have a buddy. She's kind of an empath of a dog. So she may have been feeling my feels and wanted to come comfort me.
Ruby, the pro-life dog.
Ruby is a pro-life dog. She is very pro-life. She's very, pro everything. Pro treats too, which is also another part of our relationship, right? Like our dogs are friends, and
it's radically true. It is, but I mean, and you know this about you. Obviously, you and I have somewhat similar backgrounds in terms of, our age, and my younger brother was born at about the same age. I was about the same age when my brother was born, and yeah, I may be a middle child, but I act like a firstborn child, and
I would think you were a firstborn. I'm a firstborn.
Listen, I take that as a compliment, really.
Absolutely.
But I think the thing that people don't often think about is how those early moments in our lives shape not just our personal lives, but then our professional lives. And it looks different from person to person. And I think sometimes we go through different phases in our lives where we're in, one particular profession or part of it. And then over time, we sort of see how God takes that and shifts it for ultimately his greater good. So fast forward. What's that look like for you?
So fast forward, there was a time in life when like I ran far away from my family and the like geographically. We were living on opposite sides of the country because it was hard. It was really hard. And I frankly, for a while, I didn't want to talk about it. And yet I was still drawn to serving. I kind of come from a military family, military background. I was called to, I felt a sense of patriotism, a sense of obligation to give back to the country that has given us so much, including, for the freedom of religion and, hopefully we have the groundwork for the right to life, right? And so I've got involved, or I got a job in Washington, D.C. and started learning the ropes about how public policy was being made. And I was in a very, business oriented industry. I was working with the insurance industry of all things. And so things like flood insurance and your homeowners and car and things like that. Very not emotional or what's considered now a social issue. But after time and a couple jobs, I was surprised to kind of step back and see like, oh, I've been given the opportunities to develop a whole suite of skills in this arena, the public affairs, government affairs, lobbying, political compliance and finance, that a master's degree in international commerce. So I became a very well-rounded person. And in doing that, I developed a lot of great relationships with people in Washington, D.C. and on Capitol Hill. And what's fun is that all of that has helped me become a better advocate for the Abortion Survivors Network, because I'm not like a one-trick pony. Oh, we worked together on this a long time ago. And how I came to join you was, I think, 4 years ago now, I think. And, it was time for a change in my professional career. It was kind of like a choose your own adventure. I wasn't joy-filled in my last role anymore. And I remember saying, I can do lots of things with integrity, Lord. I can clean toilets with more integrity than I feel right now, or with more joy and more pride. So I quit. And I remember reaching out to you. I was sitting at my daughter's ballet class, sitting in the parking lot. And I sent you a message saying, hey, I just quit my job on a leap of faith. If I could ever help you, pro bono, whatever, let me know. And I remember we went out to lunch afterwards and kind of felt each other out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the funny thing. You and I had ran into each other so much over the years at church and sometimes in the community. It was sort of like, hey, right? We were cordial, but we were both busy. And
right.
For people who know us now, I think they kind of go, how were you two never friends before that? You're like basically the same person.
Well, that's true. But if they really knew us, they would understand exactly why we weren't friends from the get-go as well. Because I remember kind of like girl fanning you from afar, seeing your social media posts about going and meeting with the president. And I was like, damn, she's doing a lot of cool stuff. And, but I had professional respect for you, and I didn't want to encroach on that. And I didn't want to, this is kind of funny, exploit what you were doing, for a perceived personal gain, right? I was in the corporate world. You were, kicking off this, or this ASN was blossoming, right? It had taken root and it was growing. I didn't want to get in your way, but I wanted to share some attagirls. Like, I see what you're doing and you're killing it. And but the thing I would have hated, and I think that comes from sensitivities growing up with a sister with special needs, is this concept of exploiting somebody based on their life experience or the trauma they've endured. And I think that has become one of my passions working with ASN, especially with when we work with survivors who are providing testimony, insight, giving media interviews. It's kind of like I'm protecting my sister once again, because I see the dignity in everybody's life and their experiences, and that's the big sister in me too, right? Wanting to cradle your experience and protect it and share it with those who can honor it. But also, I know that we have to tell these stories in order to change policy. We have to get more stories out in order to achieve the things that we've been dreaming about, like reporting requirements for failed, stopped, and reversed abortions at the state and federal level, so that once we have the reporting requirements, we can wrap numbers around it, and these policies can have some teeth in them, because we know that data is critical to changing policies and making change, because people don't understand the scope of the problem. They don't understand how big the solution needs to be.
And I'm going to have you kind of expand on that point, because obviously you and I talk about this stuff every single day. But what do you feel like, right, the tension that exists or has existed historically in pro-life policy when it comes to introducing policy or talking about policy and, as you said, cradling the people with stories, as we often say, right, treating these vulnerable stories with great respect? What do you feel like you've seen go well? And not just ASN, but I'm just talking, right, conservative movement, pro-life movement wise. And maybe what have you seen, I don't want to say not go well, but what have we been trying to do that's different?
Right. So I'm a big fan of what we do. We're our own biggest fans sometimes, and that's okay. Fun fact, I remember that day we went on the walk, and I told you the story about high-fiving each other, and like we should just like high-five each other for whatever we do. Hey, you got out of bed and brushed your teeth, high five. Mark it off your list. You're killing it. But in the right way of the term. You're slaying your to-do list. You're a winner. And I say that jokingly, but there's some truth to that, because the victories in this area feel few and far between. And because we are so passionate and this is an emotionally connected issue, it's heavy and it's hard. I think the heavy and the hard are countered by the light and the joy that we know each life brings to the table. Which brings us to what goes well and what goes wrong. What I have been very proud of is our ability to cultivate some relationships with journalists and reporters who are fair, but also are trustworthy. And once we start developing that trust with a journalist, we know that we can share our survivor stories and they will honor their dignity. And we've seen a couple of those stories really take off. I remember reaching out to a journalist with regard to some legislation that was moving in the state of Montana. And I was just so mad about what was happening in Montana and that there wasn't any fair coverage. And it was a cold call. And that relationship with that journalist turned out to be very fruitful. And I know that she is now moving up in her professional career, but we're keeping in touch so that we can continue to tell these vital stories. So relationships and trust are absolutely critical. Also, I think that as we maintain and retain relationships with policymakers, talking to their staff and being sure that the staff understand the impact in ways that are relatable. One of the statistics that we started sharing, Melissa, and I know you know where I'm going because we're from Kansas City, and some years the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. This year wasn't one of them. But when we looked at the number of abortions or abortion survivors during the Roe era, we calculated that number, and what we figured out was it was more people than could attend the Super Bowl. And using those nuggets of information that people can visualize and understand, gets to my previous point where we can put numbers around something that makes it real and fathomable. So having those relationships, being able to tell the stories and illustrate data in a real way makes this a tangible issue that people begin to care about. And it's not just their issue over there, or, well, I'm a dude, it's not really my body. I really shouldn't be the one, making decisions about this. No. This is about our society. This is about our community. This is about our values. This is impacting women in your life and will impact yours too, because time and time again, we haven't told the men's story about this on this side of the issue either. So making the issues relatable. What I don't think works very well is gotchas, or engaging people for drama. I think that is the drama of it. The tone needs to be, we need to simmer it down and step away from that incendiary rhetoric or interactions, because those in this day and age get played over and over and over again. And it will paint the pro-life movement as crazy and like octogenarians. But there is a whole new generation of pro-life advocates out there, and pro-life, maybe they're not even advocates yet. Maybe they're just allies. And we are turning them from allies to advocates to our champions. But, no one wants to be with the crazy people, right? So we need to have honest, respectful dialogue. Words matter. How we treat people matters. And I think that telling stories in a responsible and respectful way that protects the dignity and the vulnerability of survivors and their families is absolutely critical, which makes it really tough too, right? Because politicians especially love to take these stories and tell them over and over again. And the problem is with some of these stories is that they're unbelievable. Like, Melissa, when I tell people my best friend sat in a saline-induced abortion for days and was then accidentally born alive, they're like, wait, what? You serious? This exists? This actually happens? I'm like, yep, all the time. People don't know. But politicians will take these stories and get some of the facts wrong, and then it's a hot mess. And we spring into action to correct the narrative and protect the dignity and the life of the survivor, the today life where reporters are calling them saying, did this really happen to you? Or nope, they don't have records. So it couldn't have really happened. Well, in a day and age when oral history or beliefs, like you can call yourself a kitten, right? But you can't call yourself an abortion survivor. Man, that gets me hot.
Me too.
But as like the big sister in that policy realm, that gets me hot. And it gets me hot without like that Achilles heel of my own wound. Because I want to go and like toss some elbows and set the record straight. But it's hard to do because these people are also have powerful seats where they can generate policy and make impactful decisions. So you don't want to be too mean, but you really need to put them in their place. So I think that getting the stories right, honoring the stories, honoring the survivors, collecting data, setting good policy, and avoiding incendiary rhetoric, avoiding conflict, and know that whatever we do is a reflection on the entire pro-life movement. People outside who are dipping their toe in, they lump us all together. So we are as strong as our weakest link.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. As we wrap up, what would you give as sort of action steps for, our grassroots folks who maybe they're involved here locally in their city or their county, maybe at the state level, and those folks who obviously are watching what happens at the federal level as well, but what are like 3 action steps or key takeaways for folks when it comes to, being advocates, and not just in the pro-life movement, but, just in general? How can people live this out so it's not just a, ASN, Sarah, or Melissa situation? What does this look like in people's lives to be an advocate?
Well, early in my career, I was, exposed to, and I'm going to muck it up, or muddle it, but the quote that we get the government we deserve. And by that, we could say it's easier today than ever to get involved in elections, to pay attention to public policy. It's easier than ever to contact your elected officials, your members of Congress, your senators, state elected officials as well. Easier than ever. Most of us have like those little computers we carry around in our pockets, cell phones, and we have access to information instantaneously. So educate yourself, because you can't just be upset about the government if you aren't an active participant of what and who it's representing. So we get the government we deserve. So if you don't like it, get up, start getting creative, and participate. So that's number 1. Don't sit around and complain. No one likes a complainer. Start making a list of things that you want to do and want to change, and how you can contribute, how you can use your gifts. Because maybe you don't have time, but maybe you have treasure. Maybe you don't have treasure, but you've got talent. And there are significant opportunities to get involved in one way or another. Open your ears and shut your mouth is another great one. Listen, 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 because you gather a lot of information by listening. And then we can help formulate stronger arguments and more compelling narratives about the impact of whatever policy it is, not just a life issue. So those are 2 things that kind of go hand in hand. Hold your elected officials accountable, and, write them when you don't like the policies that are being advanced. In Missouri, we passed an amendment last year that basically brought back abortion, legalized it. But embedded in that were things like no protections for women's health, medical malpractice liabilities. A woman can die on the table and there's nothing we can do. Right? There's no coming back from that. So understand the consequences, that it's not just this choice, this one thing, but what lies behind it that is critical. So I rambled a little bit because it's such a big thing, but participating in your government, being active, politics is not a spectator sport. You got to get involved and understand too. This is actually, I think this is the big one I want to land, is that don't paint everyone with a broad brush. Okay. I find there's a group out there that I find fascinating. It's called Democrats for Life. Why aren't there more Democrats for Life out there? There's one member of Congress from Texas who's like on their good list. on our good list, but I believe that person is good. So let's try to find the good in all the people that are elected, and in our personal lives too. Oh, you voted for so and so. I can't talk to you. Find that common ground and build upon it, because there are going to be policies and opportunities. Good public policy is not partisan policy. So we need to get this partisan stuff out of our minds a little bit, right? Set that aside and look at our goals, look at our values, and try to come to agreement on that and make some magic happen. Create a better life.
And I love that you're landing there, because for me, that's what it's really about, is when we are pro-life in action, yes, we see the big picture. We understand the impact and the decisions that every person is making, especially when it comes to policy. But at the end of the day, we also see them as human beings. It doesn't mean we don't get frustrated, disappointed, all of those things. But at the end of the day, because we see them as fellow human beings, we still treat them with respect, no matter how they treat us.
Right. And I will tell you that great little story to end on. I was on Capitol Hill in one of the congressional office buildings, and I bumped into a member of Congress who's been kind of a lightning rod. She's from New York. She used to waitress and bartend, and now she's like on the oversight committee, and she's very like polarizing to some people. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you bumped into her?" I'm like, "Yeah, like I literally like bumped into her." And you know what? She was super nice. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Me too. Have a great day." Right? We're all people. We all put on our pants one leg at a time, and I think that's what's been like most interesting for me, is like the starstruckness of politicians. I'm over it. They work for us, right? But they can only do so well without our input. So providing input, providing feedback, and treating them like human beings. We all got into this world about the same way, right? Some of us a little differently, but put it this way, we're all leaving probably the same way. But that's the point, though. We're all taking our deep breaths. We all bleed red. We're all in it together. It's a matter of how we play the game. Are we going to play nice with each other? Are we going to treat each other with dignity and respect for the sake of the whole good, and try to find meaningful areas of agreement? Or are we just going to be like toss bombs everywhere we go? I think to get to a meaningful end and meaningful policy, you've got to be somebody that is not only respected, but is respectful. And being respectful comes first.
And that's what I was actually going to say as we close. As we end this interview, and folks can go to our website, abortionsurvivors.org, to not only, hear the stories of survivors and understand how we advocate for policy at the state level and at the federal level. But I hope that folks take away from this, Sarah, that there's a big reason why you're on our team. And folks may not see what you are doing every single day, because I think the most important work that you do is what happens behind closed doors. It's not the flash and splash. Yes, we do some fun things on the Hill and in other places, but day in and day out, it's you being who you are, that respectful, respectable person who was so deeply shaped by her own sister that is just in your DNA. It's who you are. And so I just want to thank you for sharing your life and your wisdom with us. And I mean, dare I say, for putting up with me on a daily basis.
Well, I was just going to say, do you want to go for a walk later?
So thank you for being here.
This is how we handle a lot of our team meetings.
It is true.
We put a lot of miles on. But It is my pleasure, and thank you for giving me the chance to walk with you on your journey, changing lives and shaping policy the way you do, and the way that only you can change hearts and minds. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at Melissa Ohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.